¿quiénes somos? No es una pregunta que nos responde el espejo. Por un lado, somos todo con lo que nos relacionamos. Somos nuestra familia, somos nuestros amigos, somos consumidores, somos creadores. Somos parte de un complejo engranaje que tiene a nuestro mundo en marcha. También somos lo que pensamos en nosotros mismos, pero lo que de verdad define quiénes somos es el qué queremos ser. Estamos hechos del mismo material que nuestros sueños, y nuestras ideas están hechas del mismo material que nosotros. El mundo en el que vivimos nos invita a plasmar parte de nosotros en él, a dejar una marca, a trascender. Cada cambio que hacemos impacta también a nuestro entorno. ¿Qué queremos ser? Se convierte en quiénes somos cuando hacemos. Queremos ayudarte a ser quien tú eres. Somos la Escuela de Negocios de América Latina con mayor proyección global, con nuestra base firme en México y nuestro espíritu extendiéndose por el mundo. Una comunidad de líderes y mentes sobresalientes que cambian desde su espíritu la realidad de los negocios. Tú eres lo que nosotros somos. EGADE Business School. Minds Igniting Change.
Bienvenidos a EGADE Future Forums. Mi nombre es Carlos Scheel, yo soy profesor emérito de la EGADE Business School del Tecnológico de Monterrey. Hoy tenemos con nosotros al profesor William Halal, que nos presentará su último libro y pues que está muy ligado a lo que nosotros desarrollamos aquí en EGADE. Sustentabilidad, tecnologías emergentes, negocios conscientes, capitalismo consciente, economías verdes, economías circulares, términos que han emergido en los últimos años como herramientas o medios para sobrepasar los enormes abismos creados por la pandemia, por las brechas sociales, las migraciones, por el cambio climático, por los plásticos, por el agua. Debido a esto, las crisis de valores, el poder de unos pocos sobre los medios de comunicación, falsa información, falta de Estado de Derecho, incapacidad de administración pública, exceso de corrupción, situaciones muy frecuentes en América Latina se han incrementado. Esto nos lleva a un gran reset, a una innovación disruptiva hacia un cambio de la conciencia, bien estructurado, que sea consecuencia de una evolución basada no en las cosas, no en los hechos, sino en los individuos y su capacidad de integrarse. Hoy, como parte de nuestros diálogos entre pensamientos del suite, del grupo del suite de la EGADE, con el apoyo de la EGADE Future Forums, me place mucho presentar al profesor William Halal. Él ha estado como yo, es ingeniero en la tecnología, sin embargo, hoy nos muestra un concepto muy diferente a este background que él tiene, que voy a leer en un momentito. Professor Halal is a professor emeritus at George Washington University with degrees from Purdue and University of California, Berkeley. Professor Halal has published 7 books and hundreds of articles, consults to corporations and governments, and is a frequent speaker. Bill also served as major in the U.S. Air Force, an aerospace engineer on the Apollo program, and is a business manager in Silicon Valley. He has received several prizes for his articles and programs. Professor Halal has been cited by the Encyclopedia of the Future as one of the top 100 futurists in the world. Also, he is founder of the Techcast, a think tank that has been dedicated for decades for the forecasting of technologies, future studies, observing the world, and is explaining the problems of global crisis and asking intelligent structure, alternatives, intelligent questions, plans, and strategies. Well, it has a very extensive curricula, but well, it's my pleasure to introduce William, my old friend, and he's going to present his book. His book is called Beyond Knowledge, How Technology is Driving an Age of Consciousness. Well, he will explain in a little minute this title, because it's a breakthrough title, okay? Well, with you, William Halal. please.
Thank you, Carlos. It's a great pleasure to be here. And I should say, buenos dias.
Buenos días.
I'm so glad to be invited. Here, I'm going to share my screen now. Now, this is this presentation makes a remarkable claim. It says that we are entering an age of consciousness now, not 20 years from now. Now, it's here now, but it's not the consciousness that we would want. It's a difficult consciousness, as we have all this craziness going around in the world. But we are in an age of consciousness, and it changes everything. We are faced with a crisis of maturity to determine whether we survive as a civilization. That is really, I think, the challenge. And I'm also going to tell you that I think what I call the life cycle of evolution, the model of civilization's progress through thousands of years, shows that we are likely to experience a mental spiritual revolution in this decade, I think, to create a global consciousness that will allow us to surmount the crisis of maturity. That, in a nutshell, is my talk. Now I'm going to go ahead and give you some details. Here is a summary of the entire talk. I'm going to start by showing you the most likely scenario from our work at Techcast for 2030. And then I'm going to show you why we're moving beyond knowledge now to an age of consciousness. And then I'm going to outline the life cycle of evolution, which is, I think, a model of civilization's progress. And I think you'll find this convincing. And then we're going to say something about the crisis of global maturity, climate change, and all of that. And then I'm going to make the case for a mental spiritual revolution that I think is likely. It's not certain, but I think it's likely. And then we're going to talk about how we shape consciousness, because consciousness is a new frontier. And just as we have, for the last 20 years, been shaping information and knowledge, now we have to shape consciousness. And then I'm going to talk about the bottom line here, the need for a global consciousness. And then finally, if we have time, the need to transform institutions so that they have a different consciousness. So that's my talk in a nutshell. If you want to look at something about the book, go to this link here, beyondknowledge.org, and you'll see a summary of the entire book. Okay, and I should say something about the cover. I just love this cover. The cover depicts a goddess. This young woman is a modern goddess, and she is giving humanity global consciousness, the vision for what is required to create a mature civilization. So that is the summary of the entire book, all of those ideas in the vision that she is giving humanity. That is the concepts from the book. Okay, now here's the summary of our work at Techcast. This integrates about 50 technology forecasts, 30 social trends, and 25 wildcards into what I call a macro forecast. Some details are missing, but this is a quick summary of what we're likely to see this decade. First of all, I think the elements of sustainability will be here, green business and genetically modified organisms and all of that. The question is, how bad will the climate problem become? Because it's severe now, and even if we did everything correct right now, it will get worse because the planet is so huge that the sheer momentum of the Earth will carry us into some dangerous territory over the next 10, perhaps 20 years. So it's going to get worse before it gets better. And then green transportation is going to be here, self-driving, hybrid electric cars, high-speed trains, all of that. Medicine is going to provide mastery over life, all of these things, DNA testing, cancer cure, all of that, I think. And then threats across the spectrum. This is not a panacea. This is not a utopia. Our wild cards show that there's a good chance of a global depression, banking crisis, job loss, all of these things. And there's some good news too. Higher order values. We see higher order values throughout all of these forecasts. An emphasis on social responsibility, transparency, diversity, women, and so forth. And then here's the bottom line: infinite knowledge and intelligence. This is right around the corner. We're going to have everything. Everything is going online. The global brain, second generation of IT systems, AI, robotics, and all of that. And the question this poses is, what happens after we automate routine thought, after we automate knowledge work? Because the bulk of the labor force in modern societies does knowledge work. What happens after we automate knowledge work? That leads to my main thesis. Beyond knowledge is consciousness by definition. And I will show you that more clearly. And so my last point here is that we need a global consciousness to solve the crisis of global maturity. We are operating beyond knowledge right now, and this requires also the restructuring of institutions. So I hope that's clear. Let's move on. Now here's the logic that explains how we are moving beyond knowledge into consciousness right now, not 20 years from now, now. It's here now. The first point is smartphones are everywhere. There are about 12 billion or so smartphones and laptops in the world. So that's more than one portable computer for every human on the planet. So smartphones and that given us access to the internet around the world. There's no shortage of knowledge. The knowledge age has succeeded. We have all the knowledge we need. And that my next point is where the book starts. Teilhard de Chardin, the great Jesuit anthropologist, long ago forecast a new sphere, a web of consciousness enveloping the earth. The new sphere is here today with more than one computer per individual connected to the internet. And that's really what's driving all of this, the digital revolution. And then social media. We know that social media is a great danger right now because everybody's connected. And so it provokes emotion, controversy, and disinformation. A great challenge. It's a big problem that has to be solved. In fact, I have a new piece coming out called How to Tame the Social Media Monster. It's a monster now. It's distorting our consciousness, and it has to be brought under control. And then the point I made earlier, AI automates knowledge. So what follows knowledge? Everything beyond knowledge is consciousness. And you can see it here in the model of consciousness. This is based on a literature review that shows the various functions of consciousness, starting at the bottom with perception and learning and knowledge and so on. That is the objective domain of consciousness. That's what computers can do, the objective stuff. But that is what's being automated. And so humans are being moved up this hierarchy into the subjective domain, emotion, empathy, purpose, will, values, beliefs. And that's where the danger lies now. We see a lot of crazy beliefs and values, and that has to change. So this is the logic that allows me to conclude we are now moving beyond knowledge into consciousness. Now here's something I'm very proud of. I worked on this for decades, the life cycle of evolution. I think this is an accurate depiction of the advance of civilization from the very beginning. And you can see the vertical scale runs through the various stages of evolution, the biological age when life was created, and then the nomadic age when humans were formed 4 billion years ago. And so we had the agrarian age, the industrial age, and so forth. We're at the knowledge age now, and the horizontal scale shows the time in a log scale. You have to use a log scale or else you wouldn't see anything. If you didn't have a log scale, this would be a flat line and it would make a sharp turn up. You wouldn't see anything. But with a log scale, it stretches out the curve and you can see the details now. As a matter of fact, my photo is obscuring the main part of the curve. I don't know if you can see that. I don't know what to do about that. But anyways, it's there. I wonder if we could do something about that. Let me see what I can do here. Yeah, that's better. There we go. Okay, so you can see what's going on now, pretty much. And so I think this is inaccurate. These are all empirical data points. This is not speculation. I've worked on this for decades, And I think that the data points are all correct. And when I plotted this the first time, I was amazed to see that the curve fits almost precisely. As people who deal with technology, you know that when you plot data, usually there's a lot of scatter. There's no scatter here, none. It fits precisely. This is an S-curve, the S-curve of life on the planet. And we are now at this point, the saturation point, the maturity crisis. That's where we are now. All of these crises that seem impossible, climate change, pandemics, inequality, the threat of a global recession, a shortage of water, everything. There are so many of these crises that people don't see how we can get through this. It's very depressing. People they think that it's common knowledge, I think, that the present global order is not going to get us there, that it's heading for disaster. Well, that would be true if we weren't entering an age of consciousness. And I think we're likely to see every one of these stages has been forced upon us by a revolution, the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, the post-industrial revolution, the information revolution. That tells me that I think we're likely to see a mental, spiritual revolution sometime in this decade to start, to kickstart the age of consciousness, to make it work. And I think it's not certain, of course, that we could fail. But I think based upon this model, it suggests that we could see a mental, spiritual revolution to introduce an age of a global consciousness in this decade. Okay, let's move on. Now, here is, this is something that Michael Merrigan and I did a few years ago. And I'll just sum it up. We found 15 trends driving what we call the mega crisis. You can see them there, climate change and so forth, and just 7 trends resolving it. And we did a survey, and it shows that people think there's a 60 to 70% probability of catastrophe or disaster. And only a small portion people think we can muddle through. And the problem is what we really know. There's a lack of leadership, political will, vision, and so forth. So that's where we are now. I think most people understand this. We are in the midst of this global mega crisis right now, and people are terrified. Everybody I talk, you can ask people off the street, do you think the present system will create a sustainable civilization? And they say no, they do not think so. Okay. Now here's what my logic for the mental spiritual revolution. As I said before, all of these stages of evolution have been driven by revolutions. So I think we're likely to see another one sometime this decade. People know the present world order is not sustainable. The World Economic Forum understands this. They've called for a global reset in all spheres of society. And the thing about the life cycle of evolution, what it shows is that the age of consciousness is the last stage in evolution. It culminates the life cycle. It culminates the growth of civilization on the planet. So it leads to global maturity. That's where we're heading. We're heading towards a global maturity if we can do it. We may not do it. We may not be able to make it as a civilization, but that's where we're heading, towards global maturity. And here's some trends. The Business Roundtable in the United States 2 years ago announced the end of shareholder supremacy, which means profit. Profit is no longer the main goal of business. They now know that all of the other stakeholders should be involved, employees, customers, and so forth. That is revolutionary. That is a change in business consciousness. And I think there's enormous potential for that if we get it right. If we get it right, it means that the big corporations, the most powerful institutions in the world will be able to solve social problems as well as making money. That is revolutionary. It means we could see a democratic form of business where employees, customers, and so forth help guide policy, and it better serves social needs and mops up all of these crazy problems. And then I noticed the The Me Too movement around the world has empowered women so that they are no longer prey to the sexual predators around, and the Black Lives Matter movement has also done the same thing. It's happening around the world. So these are trends towards a global consciousness now. They're very minor trends, really. Well, the democratization of business is not minor. That's really a major trend. But this is the beginning, I think, of a global consciousness. Now, here's what I mean by technologies of consciousness. We all try to control our consciousness, the way we think. We try to keep ourselves under control. We don't recognize that. We don't make a big deal out of it. But in fact, we always have done that. You wake up in the morning, you drink coffee to pick you up. At night, you have a glass of wine or a beer to calm you down. So we've always used technologies of consciousness. Now they have to become, I think, one of the dominant technologies in society, because we are faced with these enormous challenges. Life is going to get difficult. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. There's going to be more change, disruption. And so we're going to have to relieve stress and get control of our thinking by using technologies of consciousness, neurotech, virtual reality. The media is powerful influence. And you can see all of these things here. Drugs, psychedelics are now popular in the United States, and I think they're going to be around the world because people see that they have beneficial effects in trying to control our mind, and the servant leadership. There's a lot of things going on here. And I want us to think about these as technologies of consciousness, things that we use to shape our awareness, our mental mood, and keep ourselves under control. Now here's what I mean by global consciousness. This is not a utopia. It's not wishful thinking. It's a vision for what's needed to create a sustainable world. Just like in a business, you have to have a vision if you want to create a successful vision, a successful business. So these are the requirements that would make a civilization sustainable. We've done a lot of studies on this at Techcast, and we've used these ideas with a variety of groups, and they find it reasonable, that it makes good sense to them. So here are the 5 principles. The first is treat the earth and all life forms as sacred. The life on this planet is so rare, it's a miracle. We've been looking throughout the universe, or at least a large part of the universe, for other signs of life, intelligent life. For 50 years, we have found nothing yet. That shows how unique the planet Earth is. It's a miracle. We should treat it as a miracle. That doesn't mean we can't use the Earth and the environment, but we should do it with reverence and make sure it's healthy. The second is manage the world as a unified whole. This does not mean world government or anything like that. It simply means that corporations and nations have to collaborate with one another when it is in their self-interest. We have to work together to solve these tough problems, like the pandemic. This pandemic could have been handled a lot better if nations worked together on it. Thirdly, instill democracy and enterprise throughout institutions. These are the principles of modern society, but we don't use them very well. The typical corporation or government agency, for instance, is a dictatorship, like the central planning in the Soviet Union. And I think we have an opportunity to vitalize all of these institutions. I'll show you in a minute when we look at the transformation of institutions, but we have to make that a standard practice throughout all institutions. And then fourthly, embrace diversity as an asset. We should not be afraid of people who are different. Different people have different cultures, different knowledge. It's a good thing. We can learn from other people. And if we want to have a world that works, we have to embrace the differences. It's an asset. It's not a problem. And finally, we have to celebrate community, like the Olympics. We have to have more things like the Olympics, where people around the world meet and celebrate the fact that we are a single global community. And if we can do this, I think it's likely. It's going to surprise us, because I hear people talking about this, and we're ready for it now. And if it happens, if we can do this, we might call it a global ethics or a new world order or collective epiphany, but somehow we have to have a global consciousness if we want to have a sustainable civilization. I'm ready to wrap this up. Here's my last slide. Now, here's some of the changes that I think are needed in institutions around the world. We talked about the corporation, the collaborative enterprise, the working with all of the stakeholders to make the corporation serve social needs as well as business needs, because otherwise the corporations are in a moral crisis. The world is going to hell, and they're focusing on making money, and there is a strong reaction against that right now. Government has to change. The reason we see autocracies growing around the world is because democratic governments do not work very well. They're too bureaucratic. We need a different form of government, one that uses entrepreneurship and government markets so that services are provided to citizens and they have a choice. They can choose among competing providers. And so the providers are held accountable. This has been done in lots of places. It's a powerful idea. Education has to change to provide distance learning and to educate people around the world and so forth. I'm not going to go through all of this. The Catholic Church is in a state of crisis. I'm a Catholic. A lot of Mexicans are Catholics. The Catholic Church is in a serious problem. They've lost the trust of the parishioners because they run the church among the clergy. That can't continue. So I'm going to stop right about here. Let me see. I think that may be my last slide. Yes, that's my last slide. So I'm going to turn this over to Carlos now, and he's going to ask some questions, I think.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks a lot for this brief presentation of your book and your ideas. I have a couple of comments or questions to you. I know that you come from a technological background, and what was your motivation to write this book? A step forward, current human evolution from information, knowledge, wisdom, and now how come you arrive to consciousness as the final or to empower the technological growth that we have in this age?
That's a great question, Carlos. When I was getting my PhD at Berkeley, that was 50 years ago. That was during the free speech movement during the 60s. And I was so impressed with Daniel Bell's book, The Coming of Post-Industrial Society. It really caught my attention. You could see this happening. The computer was just entering life, and I could just see it was going to change the world. So I became fascinated with that, and I've been studying this ever since, for 50 years, really. Everything else I've done is a part of that type of study. And this book is the culmination of that work. This brings it to a conclusion. I hope that answers your question, Carlos.
Yes, Bill. But I like to know I am a technician also, and I like to know why did you make the switch, or how did you integrate the technology background to this more abstract, more spiritual?
I see. Well, I could. Yeah, well, I was focusing, as you know, with the Techcast project on the technology itself, although we studied social trends. But I could see that the technology was not the problem. It was the impact on society that was the problem. And when social media appeared and all of this craziness started coming out in the United States, it's the big lie, the lie that the 2000 presidential election was stolen. When that came out, I could see that things were changing. This was different. And the election of Trump just made it so clear that we were entering uncharted territory. And it was the social impact of technology that was more important than the technology itself. And the inability to address climate change was another thing that worried me. This is described in the preface to the book, by the way. If you see the book, read the preface and it'll explain to you the evolution of my thinking how I got to this point. I was also impressed by Willis Harman. Maybe you know Willis Harman. He was a famous futurist, and he wrote a great book about 30 years ago, Global Mind Change. Willis was ahead of his time, but he was right. I remember telling Willis that I had this great idea about a democratic corporation. And he said, Bill, that's not going to do anything unless you have a change in consciousness. And it took me 30 years to understand what Willis was talking about. This is a very hard thing to understand. You have to make a mental shift. You have to make a change in your own consciousness to understand this. So it asks a lot of people. It's a difficult thing to grasp. But once you grasp it, everything makes more sense, I think. I hope that answers your question, Carlos.
Yeah, thank you. I like a lot the term, the technologies of consciousness, but I think it's a little controversial mix, no? How do you think we can implement a program, no, as a program to promote a global consciousness? And I include Latin American countries, developing countries, no, in this whole program, to have an effective change of consciousness. And I'm on the sustainability area, sustainable. So how can you impact the sustainability of the planet, of the human race with this new approach?
I think it would be a great thing for the Mexicans to do. I have a piece in the last issue of Arras, which is the military magazine of the Mexican government. Maybe you know that magazine. There's a nice piece in it. And that's what I say. If you want security, it's not protection against war. It's protection against the global mega crisis. And that Mexicans, like every other country, should be developing their own version of global consciousness. That would be the smartest thing you can do to get ahead of the problems, to create a sustainable Mexico.
A regional consciousness, but toward a global impact, no?
Yes, yes.
So now let's talk a little bit about businesses, because this is a business forum, no? And I'd like to ask you, no, in your book you express quite a controversy concept. I quote, "When business serves all stakeholders instead of focusing on profits, is no longer capitalism." You call it collaborative enterprise or democratic enterprise.
Yes, that's right.
Can you elaborate a little bit more for us? Because this is a business forum, so please.
Yeah, you're right. That is a very important point. We like to call it capitalism, but that's really not an accurate statement. It's a market system we're really talking about. Market systems. Market systems can differ enormously. One form of market system is capitalism, where the focus is on capital, on money. The new model that's emerging now, the stakeholder model, would no longer be capitalism because it would not focus on capital alone. It would focus on all of the stakeholders. So it's more accurate to call it democratic or collaborative. It's still a market system, but it's not capitalism because it doesn't focus on capital alone. Is that clear?
Yes, and include the other client, the other customer, which is the natural environment, no? We have to include
yes, of course, yes.
To focus on this area, no?
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah, we should stop using the term capitalism. We should start calling it something else, like collaborative enterprise. That would be more accurate.
More accurate, okay.
Yeah, the term capitalism is a limited term. It has all of the wrong meaning. It's confusing. It's an old term. We should stop using that.
Unless if you add the three stakeholders, no, natural capital, the economic capital, and the social capital, no?
Yes,
as a complete term, or that takes the three stakeholders together. No, but always when you design the business, you have to design it with the three stakeholders in mind, no? Not separate, but in mind.
I think that could be a far more powerful form of free enterprise, much more powerful.
Yeah.
Okay. And the countries that do this, I think, could lead the world, Carlos. because the world needs this so badly. That's why it's happening in America, because business people know that if they don't do something about the social problems, there won't be an economy. That
Right.
we're heading for disaster. So they're forced to address the social problems.
So what would your recommendation for developing countries but under this new approach? Right now, not in the past, not in the future, right now, what would be the good measurements to take in order to take advantage of this new approach?
Well, ideally, the corporation should be, the board of directors should represent all of the stakeholders. You should have employees on the board, senior employees, like union officials, consumer advocates, people from the local government. And collectively, they would make policy that solves social strategic problems. This would not be social responsibility. That's an old idea.
Right.
That doesn't work because that's philanthropy. That's just doing good. You have to create value, and you create value under this new concept by solving strategic problems with the stakeholders, because the stakeholders know best how to serve their needs. If you want to have loyal customers, you have to talk to the customers and find out what they want. And that would make the corporation more successful in terms of money and serving the needs of customers. So I don't think there's a conflict of interest here. Business people have a great opportunity. They have an opportunity to be social heroes and to lead the way into a very difficult future.
So more than just responsibility is to create value for the three stakeholders, for the three ones, for the nature, for the social environment, and also the economic establishment. Okay.
Create value for everybody, all the stakeholders, because they are all interrelated.
Right.
It's one integral system. It's a socio-economic system. Every corporation, every organization is a socio-economic system.
I mean, social, environment, and economic, no?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And so we should optimize for the entire system.
The problem is how to design a business strategy. Well, because sustainability is expensive to apply, no? Sustainability is expensive, and then how to design a business model with all together. Okay.
Well, we have business firms that have been doing this for years, for decades, really. In every country, there's always a leading edge that does this, but they've been marginalized. They've been ignored because the main business culture is focused on profit. So all we have to do is find the leaders, the people at the leading edge, and bring that into the mainstream. They know how to do it. It's just been ignored.
So we have to create an economy, like a circular economy, like something that provokes and provides this natural capitalism and also economic capital to the social issue.
Yeah, like for instance, in Spain, it's the Mondragon. The Mondragon has been doing this for 50 years.
Mondragon.
Yes, in Spain.
Mondragon, yes, in the Basque country.
Yeah, they're very successful. So this has been happening around the world, but now we have to make it in the mainstream, bring it into the mainstream, learn from them.
Right, excellent. Okay, Bill, I think that we are going to cut here, and I want to thank you.
Thank you, Carlos,
for your participation, and also thank you for the book. I read it, and I hope that the people who is hearing us may access to this book. Thank you very much for sharing your research, your book, your ideas. I hope that we can adapt them to our context in Latin America. I know that this is a very short presentation. I hope that we can have a more extended interaction, because here in Latin America, we need these new ideas, we need this change. And well, thank you very much for being with us. I'm going to switch to Spanish now to thank the audience.
Thank you. Adiós. Adiós.
No todavía. Okay. Thank you, Bill. Muchas gracias a todos. Terminamos nuestro diálogo entre pensamientos de esta EGADE Future Forum. este espacio que nos ha dado la EGADE para presentar este libro, y a mi amigo William Halal. Ojalá que podamos nosotros expandir estas ideas con todos los negocios, las empresas, las industrias, la gente de política pública, porque creo que necesitamos usar estos conceptos para lograr que la humanidad sea más consciente del problema grave del planeta, que para mí es mantener nuestra continuidad en él. El planeta no se va a acabar, nunca, va a durar mucho, nosotros sí, estamos en peligro de extinción, y por lo tanto debemos de escuchar estas ideas, cambiar nuestra conciencia y pues ser un poco más amables, más conscientes de los problemas naturales y cómo nos afectan. Muchas gracias, Bill, de nuevo. Thanks a lot, y muchas gracias a todos por estar con nosotros en esta EGADE Future Forum. Saludos para todos.
Are you ready to fully scale your career and transform your leadership impact? You already have built an outstanding trajectory, but you know that there is a lot more still waiting for you. And moving forward in a straight line will not guarantee your way to the top. So far, you have learned that planning each move ahead and changing the course of action is the key to unleash your leadership potential. Now, reaching your C-suite goals is only 15 months away with the EGADE WP Carey Executive MBA. Seize this unique opportunity of getting an unrivaled double degree in Latin America. A unique partnership between EGADE Business School at Tecnológica de Monterrey and the WP Carey School of Business at Arizona State University. Experience a true executive immersion with 3 global residencies along with like-minded international business leaders. And join a global network of over 120,000 accomplished business leaders across 160 countries. The time has come to fulfill your C-level goals and experience a career-redefining opportunity. Take a leap further and transform your leadership into its full potential. EGADE WP Carey Executive MBA. Double your career impact.
Conviértete en un líder experto en la innovación financiera donde sea que te encuentres. EGADE, Maestría en Finanzas Online. Un programa de tan solo 18 meses para acelerar tu crecimiento a tu ritmo y sin necesidad de mudarte. Optimiza tu aprendizaje a través de un modelo 100% digital con plataformas y metodologías de vanguardia. Siempre de la mano de la Facultad de EGADE Business School. Adquiere competencias académicas y prácticas para enfrentar los retos de la innovación fintech y Big Data. Comparte con expertos de la industria, destacados emprendedores y compañeros internacionales para enriquecer tu experiencia y red de contactos. Accede a exclusivos cursos, talleres y experiencias internacionales en línea para potenciar tu crecimiento más allá de tu especialidad. Forma parte de la nueva generación de líderes que están transformando las finanzas a escala global. EGADE, Maestría en Finanzas Online. EGADE Business School, la escuela de negocios número 1 de América Latina. Challenge the present, shape the future.